Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all. There's something I notice again and again in my work as a doctor, in my conversations with women of all ages, and in my personal life as well. Women today are tired in a very specific way. They're not just physically tired, but they're mentally overloaded. They're emotionally stretched and constantly holding things together. Because we're wives, mothers, professionals, caregivers, emotional regulators, organizers, problem solvers, and often all at the same time. We're expected to work as if we don't have families, and to raise families as if we don't work. We're expected to stay calm, nurturing, emotionally available, while also being productive, ambitious, and independent. We should look good, feel good, perform well, and never complain too much. If you recognize the feeling of functioning at high speed all the time while you don't feel well or healthy, please consider the following. If you look at disease patterns, a very clear difference appears. Men, especially as they age, are more prone to cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes. Women, on the other hand, are far more prone to autoimmune diseases, chronic inflammatory conditions, functional syndromes like IBS, fibromyalgia, thyroid disorders, chronic fatigue, and in general unexplained pain syndromes. And this is not just a theory of mine, this is well documented in medical research. Around 75 to 85% of autoimmune diseases occur in women. And yet, despite this, women's symptoms are often taken less seriously. And this might be one of the most uncomfortable truths of medicine all over the world. Multiple studies show that women are more likely than men to be misdiagnosed, diagnosed later, or not treated adequately, especially when their symptoms are diffuse, chronic, pain-related, fatigue-related, gastrointestinal, or hormonally linked. Women's pain is more often labeled as psychogenic. They're more likely to be told symptoms are stress-related, and they're more likely to receive antidepressants instead of diagnostic workups. Research also shows that this bias can be more pronounced when the treating physician is male, not because of bad intentions, but because medicine has historically been based on male physiology. For decades, clinical trials focused on men. Normal values were male-based, and women's hormonal complexity was considered a confounder. So when women present with complex, cyclical, or inflammatory symptoms, they are often not believed, or not believed early enough. For me, two of the clearest examples are PCOS and endometriosis. Both are common, both affect fertility, both cause pain, inflammation, metabolic issues, and emotional distress. And sadly, both take years to be diagnosed. On average, endometriosis takes 7 to 10 years to be diagnosed, while PCOS is often dismissed as just irregular cycles or weight issues. Women are told that painful periods are normal and that they should just lose the extra weight. And then we as a society wonder why infertility rates are rising and why trust in the medical system is eroding. I once worked with a patient that had just suffered a stroke, and something that she said stayed with me for a very long time. She said, "Of course, the stroke was terrible, but at least now I'm hospitalized. And for the first time in years, I finally have time to knit. I can sit quietly, do nothing else, and no one expects anything from me." And to be honest, I understood her all too well. How overwhelming must life be if a woman finds relief, even a small sense of peace, only when something as serious as a stroke forces her to stop? How exhausting must everyday life feel if illness becomes the only socially acceptable excuse for rest? I caught myself thinking something even more uncomfortable, that sometimes in the middle of the tasks, the rushing, the responsibilities, I too wish for an external reason, an excuse to simply stop, to do something simple and calming, to knit, to sit down, to have nothing to organize and nothing to manage. Because many of us do not feel allowed to rest unless our bodies break down, and that is deeply concerning. We should not need illness to give us permission to be calm. We should not need hospitalization to justify doing nothing. So please try to create moments of rest in your life, moments where you simply sit and do nothing. Watch migrating birds fly in perfect harmony, or quietly observe how the world moves around you. These moments of stillness can anchor you, especially when the world around you feels too fast, too loud, and somehow out of touch. When it comes to the feeling of stress, here is where biology and culture often intersect. Women do not just experience stress differently, they are often trained to suppress it. Men are socially allowed to express anger, raise their voice, or externalize frustration. Women are more often expected to stay composed, keep harmony, absorb tension, and be understanding. So instead of releasing stress outward in a healthy way, many women internalize it. But the problem with chronic stress is that it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, but it also alters cortisol rhythms and directly affects immune regulation, gut permeability, hormonal balance, and inflammatory pathways. To be clear here, this does not mean that stress causes autoimmune disease, but in susceptible women, it can push the immune system toward dysregulation. That's why many autoimmune conditions flare after emotional trauma, during prolonged stress, postpartum, or during caregiving overload. Another pattern that quietly makes women sick is that we always seem to be in a rush. A while ago, it was a very hectic morning. I had to bring my son to kindergarten, and I was already late for work. So I told my son to hurry up multiple times. And at one point, he just started crying, and he told me, "I don't want to rush all the time." And he was right. The reason I rush him is because this is how I live my life. I rush everything. I rush cooking, cleaning, working, transitions, and even moments that could be calm. But living in this constant urgency keeps the body in stress mode all the time. And chronic urgency affects the nervous system, immune regulation, hormones, and digestion. On the one hand, yes, this is a question of time management, but far more important, it's a question of mindset. And it is something that we can learn and practice. Once a day, you can choose one task and do it without rushing. Tell yourself, I'm allowed to take my time, breathe, move slowly, and avoid any background noise or music. Let your thoughts flow, because this simple act can help regulate your nervous system. And when the nervous system calms, your body can finally begin to heal. The problem with rushing is that it is not just a personality trait. It is cultivated by our environment far more than we realize. I became very aware of this when I changed my working spaces, and I see it very clearly with the people around me. My husband, for example, works in orthopedics and emergency surgery. And when they do their morning rounds, time is extremely tight, and you can feel it in the way conversations happen. If the answer is more than one sentence, the patient is cut off immediately, because everyone knows if you let the patient speak freely, it becomes hard to stop them again. So communication is reduced to the bare minimum. And I saw how much my husband struggled with this after work. When someone talks around the topic or takes time to explain something, I can see how it makes him very nervous. And I noticed the same thing in myself. I started my medical career in a surgical department as well, and I was exactly the same. I wanted short answers, I felt stressed by very long explanations, and then I switched to internal medicine, and it was a bit slower, but still it was very structured and time-focused. But then I started working in geriatrics, and this was a culture shock for me. Some patient visits took half an hour just for one person. Everything was asked. When was their last bowel movement? How did it look? And how many stairs they have to climb at home? And I remember in the beginning, on the inside, I was screaming. I felt this inner rush so intensely, but slowly I began to see the necessity behind every question, that all of it mattered, medically, emotionally, socially. And as I adapted, my inner rush started to soften as well. I noticed a real change in myself. I would look for a chair in the room, sit down and talk to my patients. I asked them questions that were not strictly necessary. And that was when I decided I want to keep this slower rhythm in my life as much as possible. When it comes to the topic of mental load, this is where I want to get very practical and very honest with you. One of the biggest mistakes I made, and I see this in so many women, is that I kept taking things on without thinking about the long-term cost. You take on one task, then another. None of them feel dramatic on their own, but over the years, the mental load grows. Remembering everything, planning for everyone, anticipating needs, and often forgotten, holding emotional space. We will tell ourselves, I can handle this, until one day we can't. And all of this can lead to women that feel resentment toward their partners or their families. Not because those people are unwilling, but because expectations were never clearly communicated, and slowly frustration builds. But it is unfair to expect people to read our minds. It is unfair to suffer silently and then feel angry about it. And I have seen so many women across all ages and with different cultural backgrounds silently suffer. Yes, asking for help puts us in a vulnerable position, but vulnerability is often a relief, and it can prevent years of emotional and physical exhaustion. And it might prevent you from falling ill. And this applies to marriage, parenting, work, and family expectations. I truly believe that many women become ill because they learn to endure instead of express. So this is one of the most important pieces of advice. If something feels heavy now, talk about it now, not later, not when symptoms have already appeared, not when resentment has already settled. I don't have all the answers to the problems I've described, but I do know this. I personally need to live a softer, slower life in order to stay healthy. And I know that women's bodies all over the world are responding to lives that ask too much of them. For all of us, healing begins when we're listened to, when we speak sooner, when we rest without guilt, when we slow down, and when we choose presence over productivity. The holy month of Ramadan is drawing nearer. Perhaps this blessed month can be a reminder helping us to see through the noise of daily tasks and constant distractions. May Allah bless our efforts. Assalamu alaikum.